Hey guys, Gene here. This is a video I'm going to post about Dungeons & Dragons dungeon mastering. So this is kind of a video blog on how in my home group we set up a campaign that's really worked out well so far. We are 9 sessions into it, and it's been really well received by the players. So I'm going to tell you how we built this collaborative campaign setting, homebrew, and what's been great about it, and how we did it. So just from the beginning, I wanted to let you know kind of how this even evolved. So it all started with this idea that we've all wanted to play a certain kind of character, or 2 or 3, right? I mean, there's this sort of ideal character that we want to be when we play a game like D&D, but what happens is that in reality, in any game that's being played with published materials, the players are sort of subservient to the materials, right? So if you're running Pathfinder, or one of the Wizards products like the Hoard of the Dragon Queen or whatever, then you're playing in that setting, and maybe your character fits that, and maybe it doesn't. And so we've all been part of these campaigns where we had to kind of shoehorn our concept into the setting, or the things we really wanted to do just weren't part of the campaign. I mean, if you wanted to be like a merchant prince, right? But you get stuck in a dungeon crawl campaign, then you have to sort of subjugate what you want to do based on what the campaign dictates. And that's true, in homebrew games too, right? I mean, the DM wants to run a certain kind of a game, and he says, "Hey, I'm thinking of starting a game of Traveler, set after the long night," or I've decided I want to, run a game based in Greyhawk, and we're gonna kick it old school in the city of Greyhawk. Okay, well, that's how games usually start, and so it's also how games kind of flame out. I mean, nobody ever talks about the campaigns that die, right? I mean, the ones where people, the DM loses interest, or he burns out, or there's a misstep or a wrong turn, or people say, "Hey, thanks for running, but we want to really just play board games tonight," And so that happens. This idea that we're all sort of living in this social media fantasy world where everything's great, and yes, we always have these great games, and they always go well, and everybody participates. Those campaigns are rare. And so what I wanted to do was to create a campaign that all the players were totally invested in, and that they wanted to be in. They wanted to play it. They were going to help me create it. And my role was less of a world builder than I had previously tried to be. And it was more of an editor role, gathering content and merging it appropriately. So again, the idea was it was player and character focused, right? Who are the protagonists? And when I was conceiving of this, and I'm not saying I invented it, okay? I'm just saying that it occurred to me independently, and then I looked it up, and oh, well, there's other people who have done this too. But I mean, you think about a protagonist like, say, Conan. So Robert Howard, in writing those novels, I'm willing to bet, was writing about Conan, right? He wasn't writing about the world of Hyboria, although that's where Conan was, right? But that's kind of the chicken and egg. And I think in this case, what came first was the character. And then he thought, this is who my character is. This is who my main character is. This is what he looks like. This is his attitude and approach to the world. This is the kind of stuff I want him to do in the world. And then let's build a world that kind of suits that character, right? And so, and I don't know if that's how Robert E. Howard came up with Conan and his adventures, but it made sense to me. And so instead of me projecting what I think the players want to do, the solution that came to me was, let's have the players tell me what they want to do, and I get to participate in that too, because I'm one of the players too. All right, so I'm not, completely subjugating what I want. I mean, I'm a participant. I'm an equal participant in this. So what I did was I made a questionnaire, and the questionnaire basically asked 2 questions that with many subparts. But the 2 questions are: who is the favorite character that you want to play in the best campaign you could ever conceive of? So let's let that sink in for a minute. That's a pretty ballsy question, isn't it? I mean, it's basically saying, who do you really want to play? And obviously there could be 3 or 4 different concepts, and we've all had, toyed around with different things, but I think most of us can kind of lock in pretty quick on, our core 2 or 3 things we really want to do. And then the second big question with many subparts was, okay, so what does the world look like that this character has heroic adventures in? And so I did this questionnaire, and it was about, 3 or 4 pages long, and I sent it to all the players, all of them. And our gaming group is pretty big. There's 10 players, which is big for most home games, that's a whole other topic we'll get into, believe me, because that has its own challenges. But so I sent it out to all of them, and it got into everything from who the character was, and what was the climate in his home world and home city, and what was the magic level and the danger level, and how important are the characters, what kinds of adventures do you want to have? Is it high magic or low magic? What are some of the things that you've loved in previous campaigns? What are some of the things you've hated in previous campaigns? And so I was really trying to get into my players' gamer souls. And it was the other important thing was that it was a blind questionnaire. I did not want them talking to each other. I wanted to get their honest, gut level reactions about what kind of game they wanted to play in. And then as the responses came in, and I did mine first, because I did one too, because I have a character too, by the way. Yes, the DM has a character. And we ended up collaborating and pulling all those questionnaires together into a spreadsheet. And I eventually shared this 95% of the content of the spreadsheet with all the players. And then we had a meeting, basically, after all this was done, to say, hey, these are the tendencies that arrive. In other words, this is the, if you imagine all the players as being one of those, concentric circle graphs, where these are the circles that overlap with those circles, and what's that sweet spot in the middle of at the intersection of all those circles that would be this awesome game that everybody wants to play. And for the most part, there was overlap with everybody. It wasn't the same overlap. I mean, there were some people that wanted a different experience. But, it's a fairly established gaming group, and so it's not terribly surprising that there was a lot of substantial agreement on what they wanted to do. Not completely. And so then we had this sort of idea of who wanted to play what. And the other important thing was that it wasn't based on rules, like I want to be an Eldritch Knight Dragonborn. I mean, it didn't have to be that specific. It was more about the character type, the personality possibly, what parts of the character were really important. And it was done without regard to party balance or power levels or any of that stuff. It was about, what do you want to play? And that's a pretty profound question, and I got answers from them. So then I sat down and I asked the players to do the same, because they had most of the same information, and to come up with some campaign concepts that were in those sweet spots, excuse me, that were in those sweet spots of the overlapping circles of their common interest. And so I came up with two concepts that were different, but the same. I mean, not totally the same, but there were a lot of thematic similarities, but the magic level was different. The way it played would be very different. But that was the story of how we kind of came up with these concepts. So then, as it turned out, I mean, I was the organizer, and I have the energy and the desire to go do it. None of the players came up with a concept of their own, although they were free to. And they picked one of the two concepts. They picked it. I didn't pick it or force it on them. They collectively picked it. So then I had a second round of collaboration where we really fleshed out not only their characters, but everything about where their characters were from, their families. And so we built the campaign world based on what they were telling me, okay? The setting and what was involved. And so it all, I was getting tremendous collaboration from them about, who are the important NPCs, who are some of the bad guys, what is this world like? And I was able to incorporate a lot of my previous homebrew stuff. But when a player's collaborative contribution was different than what I had originally conceived, you know what I did? I chucked my stuff out the window and I used the collaborative content. And that was really hard at first, but that turned out to be, I think, one of the biggest reasons why we've had success with it, is that I wasn't married to my concept and my ideas. Other people have just as good as ideas as DMs do. A lot of them are frustrated former DMs or wannabe DMs, and they can contribute in a lot of ways that you don't even know about. And some of them, it could be in different areas. It could be anything from drawing to doing maps to doing miniatures to finding new game rules. It could be a guy who likes to do backgrounds. Some people are really into music. I mean, there's all kinds of elements that people can bring. One guy got completely into the lineages of these noble families, and he did this tremendous family tree from scratch of this noble family or three that he had invented for the purpose of the campaign. Well, I hadn't thought of this noble house or what they were, but he brought this to the table. So what am I going to do? Chuck it out the window or change it? I mean, it needed to be, it needed to fit, but I mean, it was like 90%, 95% like ready to go content. And I'm like, yeah, grab it, just get it in there. And what happened was the players owned the campaign pretty much from the first session. And you talk a lot about player agency when you get on the internet. You read people's DM blogs and stuff, or you go to EndWorld or whatever, or you go to Wizards community page, and people want to feel like that their actions matter, that they're not being railroaded, or that they have choice. Well, this takes that to a whole nother level, right? Because we're not just talking about in-game choice, we're talking about choice of what they want to do campaign-wise. What does the campaign look like? I have players that have different goals. They're not inconsistent goals, but the players themselves want different stuff to happen in the campaign. And so my job is to try to make that happen, right? And not to play favorites or to ramrod a story down that I want to do when none of them care about it, right? So that's been just a wonderful source of inspiration for me, and they're so appreciative. It's been a pleasure to run it. They are invested in the NPCs, in the storylines that they're a part of and that they've created. Let me give you an example. Some of the players became infatuated in the DM's guide with the carousing table, right? It's a downtime activity, right? Well, one of them found or invented kind of a more elaborate version of that. And so in our very first session, the one of the players is playing like a princely character. Well, he decides he's going to join the drinking contest. And he says, yeah, I'm going to roll on the carousing table. Okay. He rolls on this carousing table, and what does he get? He gets, you wake up the next morning with a new bride. First session, right out of the gate. Whatever, railroading I was going to do, that's out the window. Fortunately, it worked out. I was able to find him that his new bride from his drinking game was another noble. But this is a guy who's second in line to the throne, right? So, that completely changed, what was happening, and he did it. He chose to do it, and then the dice did it, and the players loved it. The players knew right then, from the very first session, that they could change the outcome of the story and the game world and what was going to happen, and that's given them a great sense of not just personal power, as players, but for their character's sake, and it's made them really invested in it. I mean, they know as much about the game world in some ways as I do, and I'm the one running it, right? So, this sort of homebrew campaign is a lot of work. We put in a ton of time at the front end and in between sessions. I mean, this particular gaming group meets weekly, okay? I've run 8 sessions since February, and it's June now. We don't play this game every week. There's a rotation of other games that are being played. And thank God, because I couldn't keep up with it. Just the workload. After every session, we do this, 2 to 3 page recap of what happened and who the characters are, and the players are into it. They print out these recaps that we do. They've got folders, they've got notes, we've got handouts. There's been maps, and there's certificates, like certs for magic items that they've printed out, and they've kept them. And so this is their game. They want to play it. They have ideas. In fact, the only downside to this is that there's so much to do that deciding what to do is a bit of a there's just so many threads to pull on, right? So we've been really lucky so far. It's a lot of work, but it's been great, and I have a group of players that really want to play, and I'll kind of leave the video blog on this note, because I have a character too. When we have rules about how that works, basically whoever's DMing. Now, so far it's just been me, but the whole idea of this was that somebody else could pop in and run, as many sessions as they want to run. It's not my game. And now, as the editor, there's some story things that I know about that other people don't, but there's nothing stopping somebody from jumping in and running 3 or 4 sessions or doing whatever they want. So I have a character too, and when I'm DMing, my character is being run. He fades into the background on interactions, so I'm not talking to myself, and another player runs him in combat. But if one of the players wants to jump in and run an encounter, or if they want to run a session, then we swap seats, and I'm a player, and so that kind of ownership. So it's a ownership of the campaign to the extent that the players can run it too. We're all the DMs and we're all the players. Obviously, right now anyway, I've been the one who's been spearheading it in terms of the where it's heading and the editing of it. But I fully expect that some of the other players are going to jump in and want to run stuff. So. That's a key part of this, because it's my game too, right? for me, it was, how can I build something that I would want to play in? Well, how cool. I get to make something with these other great players who care about it as much as I do. And then, you know, that's the ultimate DM frustration, is we all make campaigns that we wish we could play in. Well, I can't, you know? So that was the intent selfishly for me, which is the same motivation for the players, that they get to play in a game that they've always wanted to play in because they just made it up. Now, I'm not saying that this is for the faint of heart, and the time investment is there. If this is something that, you know, scares you for the time commitment, I'm not bagging on anybody else's method for running a campaign or starting one. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with starting a campaign in the Forgotten Realms and saying, okay, you know, make me some Sword Coast characters. We're gonna play Dragon Queen, or we're gonna play, you know, the Lords of the Abyss, or whatever published, you know, material you want to run. There's nothing wrong with that. And, you know, sometimes players stumble onto concepts of characters that they didn't even know they wanted to do until the DM, you know, created a campaign and said, hey, this is what we're doing, and the players merge into that. So, and I will also say that, you know, I think this is probably best for a more mature group who is more self-aware of what they really want to do. I mean, I think if somebody had sent me one of those questionnaires 20 years ago, I don't know that I would have had as much self-awareness to really answer it and say, you know, this is really what I want to do. Because you have to have played for a while to figure out, man, we had this one game where I had this one character and it was so great, but, you know, he died, or the campaign died, or the DM just wasn't doing what I wanted him to do, and so I wanted to get back to this because this was great. And so that was that kind of concept was really a common denominator for all the players when we were doing the questionnaire. So please feel free to ask questions in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them either in comments or to do a Q&A type video about it. But and I'll post more on sort of the DMing theory behind this, and kind of how to make the nuts and bolts of it work if there's interest in it. But feel free to like it and leave your comments, and we'll talk again.